Okay, everybody, hi. Thank you for coming. I'm really happy to be here. I'm very excited. I see many of you already signed in. It's really nice. My name is Yuval, and we will have a workshop, more or less 2 hours, maybe going to take less. And I'll show you what is Amplication and how to use Amplication to build Node.js APIs. Of course, with Prisma under the hood, and I'll show you everything around it. So we're going to follow this document. I'm going to paste this link in the chat so everybody can open it on your side and can follow that along while we're working. So you have that in the chat right now. So a few prerequisites before we go. I will show you some administration before we start digging. So first, we're going to show you, I'm going to show you some hands-on code, and then you're going to have the ability to do it yourself and write it yourself. So in order to do that as in part of the session, you will need Node.js installed, of course, on your machine, Docker installed in order to run the generated application. You will need a GitHub account in order to sign in and use Amplication. And I recommend follow my instruction with VS Code, but of course you can use your favorite IDE. So a couple of words about what is Amplication and what we're going to do today. So Amplication is a platform that allows developers, pro developer, to really quickly build database application from really early stage, if you just want to do prototyping or anything like that, and get APIs in minutes with all data models. And Amplication also allow you to do deployment and scaling and all that with a mix of low code and pro code. So you do a lot of configuration with the UI or CLI, and then you also have the option to use actual custom code in order to customize the app. What we will learn in this session, we will have 4 lessons. Each one of them going to be 15 to 20 minutes. We'll start by creating our first application with Amplication. We will use the UI. In the second lesson, we will use the CLI. We will see how we can use the CLI. Then we will dig into the generated app. We will look into the technologies, GraphQL, REST API, all the technology stack that we use in order to create application in Amplication. And finally, we will see how we can add custom code in order to add business logic and other customization to our APIs. Like I mentioned, each session is going to be 15 to 20 minutes. We're going to have some time in between session for you to run the code on your own and follow my instructions. A few other administrative before we start going through the lessons. So a few words about myself. My name is Yuval. I'm founder and CEO of Amplication. I'm a developer for more than 30 years now. I'm 42. Started on working on Amplication. It's an open source project. Started to work on it a year ago. We already have great community and great user base that's already using Amplication, providing feedback, providing feature requests, reporting issue, and I welcome you all to join. If you want to contact me, you can contact me in any of the below links. Some logistic about Zoom, so I cannot really hear you. The only thing I can see is the chat if you want to write anything, but I cannot really follow the chat if it's too chatty, and you are welcome to use the chat freely if you want. But if you want to make sure I will not miss anything, so please use the Q&A panel. The Q&A panel is a separate panel that you can ask question and then I can reply on it. Everybody can see the question if we choose to share the question, or you can I can answer them online or either with text. The chat is for your usage. Use it freely if you want. The workshop is recorded, so eventually it will be shared with everybody, so you can use it. That's it for now. I think we can start the session. Maybe just before we start, one quick poll. If you want to raise your hand, if you ever used or heard about Application, or is this the first time you see application? So if you ever used it before, just raise your hand, please. All right, few of you, cool. Most of you didn't use application yet, so I'm really excited to show you application. So let's start. I think this is the best thing to do at this moment. We will click on the first lesson and we'll start follow the instruction. The goal of the first lesson is to really create your new first application on application. We want to understand what application does, how to create data entities, and how to generate the code and push it to Github repo. So first step we'll do is sign into application. So you're invited to go to application.com or app.application.com. You can, if you go to application.com, you can then click on login and go to the actual app. Like I mentioned, application is an is an open source product, but it's also offer an hosted managed version. You can just go to application and use it. You don't have to deploy your own server, but if you want to do it, you are more than welcome. The managed server is free. All you need to use is GitHub credential in order to sign in. Okay, so let's start following the steps and just create our first application. So the first thing would be to create a new application. We will just create on new app and we start from scratch. There is a sample app if you want to start from more advanced or sample entities. But as we can see, this is our first app. We can see that we have a new user entity. If we will open that entity, we can see that this entity comes built in with some built-in fields like password, roles, first name, last name. Of course, we can add more fields as we like. What we will do in the next few steps, we will create one more entity, and then we will generate the code and we'll start using the code almost immediately before moving to create more entities with the CLI. So the one thing we will do right now, we will go and create our first data entity. Just one note, since there is no coding in that lesson for lesson 1, you are invited to follow me while we're doing it together. If you have a separate screen, or you can share your screen, I'll split it. But then if you don't want to follow, you just want to listen first, I will give you a few minutes after that to do it yourself. So let's go and create our first entity. That's going to be the project entity. So we go here, we'll go to entities, either with the menu or from the tab. We'll click on add entity and we'll create a new entity called project. The entity comes with some built-in fields like ID, created that and updated that. Now we're going to go and add some fields to our entity. We're going to add a name, a description, and a start date. So let's go and do that. We'll add the name field. It's going to be the name of the project, of course. It's going to be single line text. We will not change that. Then we wanted to add description and start date. So the next one going to be description. As you can see, application automatically identified the type of the required field. So for example, description going to be a multi-line text, and start date is going to be a daytime. Of course, if you want to change that and the guess is not accurate enough, you can change that. We can select any of the single line text, multi-line text. We can choose email, all number, decimal number. Of course, each one of those fields comes with additional validation or additional property per type. For that case, we said we're going to use the date time, and that's going to be the start date of the project. Move on to the next step. The next step is going to be to add a relation field. So we want to create a relation to a user. So we're going to go and create an owner field. So let's create the owner field. We can call it user, by the way. And like I said, application will automatically see that that's going to be a relation to a user entity with a user with a relation to user. But we can call it any name we would like, and then change that. So thank you, Alan. Somebody just told me I didn't share my screen until now. Wow, Sorry about that. Okay, now I see that on the screen. Okay, okay. Wow, thank you very much, guys, for that. So maybe I'll go and do a quick recap of what I did until now. So I created a new app. So let's do it again. Let's create another app. So I created a new app. I clicked on Start from Scratch. We got a user entity. I created a new entity called Project. Okay, this is our project entity. We created the name field on that. We see that this is a single line text. We created description. That's a multi-line text. And the last one going to be start date. And that's the date time. Now we are in the fourth step. We're going to add a relation to the project owner. So that's going to be, like I said, we can call it user or owner. And that's going to be a relation to the user entity. Moving on to the next step, we can, okay, let's make that field required. So we have to select an owner for each project. And that's it. We are ready to go and generated our API for that specific entity. So of course, after that, we're going to add some few more entities. So in order to do that, what we want to do, we want application to generate the code and sync and push the code, the generated code, to our GitHub account. So what we're going to do, we're going to go here. We're going to click on the settings tab on the dashboard and then sync with GitHub. And what we want to do, we want to sync with the GitHub account. We can click here in order to go and create a new repository. So this is our GitHub, my GitHub account. I'm just going to go and create repository called Prisma Day. I can leave it public. I'll add a Readme file and create a repository. I have an empty repository here. I'll go back to application. And now I will ask application to sync with GitHub. I will go through the authorization process. And once it's approved, I'm going to go and select the repository. And this is going to be this Prisma Day repository that I just created. That's it. We're ready. Let's have a look on our instructions. So we did all that. Now, once it's completed, we can go and commit the changes in order to push the code to GitHub. So I will call that initial commit and commit changes to GitHub. Maybe before doing that, we can see that we have two changes, an update on the user entity, which was pre-populated with the app, and creation of new project. We can even compare changes. Basically, we see some YAML files with the changes. And once we're ready, we commit the changes and build. This process is going to take like maybe 5 to 6 seconds. And once it's done, we can even see the logs on the background. But once it's done, the code is pushed to GitHub. And we just need to click on Open GitHub in order to see our code. So we have 178 files that was generated in our new pull request. We just merged that pull request. Click on confirm merge. And the entire code is here. Everything is here. We have our admin UI, we have the server, we have everything else. And of course, we're going to explore the generated code in the next session, in the third session, after we'll use the CLI. I'll just show you now, before I give you a few minutes to do the same, that while we will move on to the next lesson, application is building a Docker image, and this image will going to be deployed to a sandbox environment on Application Cloud. So you're going to get an endpoint with your live API, REST and GraphQL API and admin UI, the whole package, and you will be able to start working with your application. You will be able to start writing your own custom clients, like a native mobile app or web application or anything like that, using that server, the backend we created. It's going to take maybe 5 to 7 minutes in order to complete the Docker generation and deployment. But that's something we're going to see later. Now, I'm going to give you like maybe 3-4 minutes to complete these specific steps. If you need if you didn't do it yet. And then we move on to the next step to see how we're going to use Application Cli, and now we can generate entities and data fields and everything with code. I'm going to stop my camera for a few minutes, give you time to work on your own. If you have any question, feel free, and I'll be here on the Q&A to reply. Okay, so I'm going to give you another minute or two just to complete the task, and then we can move on. Anyone who completed the task, can you please raise your hand? Let's see if everybody completed. Maybe we can already move on, and if not, we'll give you another minute. Okay. There are still people running, so. Okay, so let's move on. Lesson number 2, we're going to see how we're going to use Application Cli to generate just another entity, and then once again generate the code and move to the next lesson. First, let's quickly visit Application Cli on npm.js. Of course, you can see this is a public on npm.js. It's all well documented. You can go ahead and explore that for any further commands after this lesson if you want to do something that I didn't show. For that lesson, I'm just going to show you how to create an entity, how to create some field on the entity, and how to commit the changes. So the first thing would be to install Application Cli. So just copy that command, and before we continue, just install the CLI. The CLI is of course already installed on my machine, so I'll skip that step. The next thing going to be is to authenticate with the CLI. So first, let's go here to the terminal. You can see that I can just write AMP and it will identify application CLI that is installed and running. Now, the next thing going to be to authenticate the CLI with the our server, application server. So you go to application dashboard once again, click on that dashboard icon, click on API tokens, and create a new API token. Just let's call it CLI A, and I will create a token. Of course, you will be able to see my token and use it, but that's totally cool for that application. I'll copy that, and I'll go to the CLI, and I will use that AMP out, and I will paste the token, and I'll just click enter, and you see that I'm successfully logged in to the server on the server, on application on the server. So right now we can start using application CLI in order to do to run the command, execute the command, and do whatever we want with the app. So application CLI has some context called current application, which allow you to avoid sending the app ID with every execution of every step. So we will use the set current application command first in order to set the current app. So I'll go to the CLI, I'll paste that here, and I'll go back to application and I'll copy my app ID. This is my app ID. And I'll paste that here. And now this is our current application. So just to test that, we can run AMP entities, for example. And we will get a list of entities. So we see we have our project entity, for example, and we have user entity. So we know that this is our current app. Now we'll go back to the steps. After setting the current application, we want to create the entity task. So I'll go ahead here and create the entity task. AMP entities, create, task, and set current. Of course, once again, we asking application to setting the new entities as the current entity. So when we create fields, we do not have to specify the entity. So the next thing going to be to create some fields. So for example, we're going to create a title, estimation, project, and user for the entity, for the task. So first going to be title. Second going to be estimation, project, and user. Now you can notice we didn't really specify anything on the fields. We didn't specify the data type. We didn't specify any properties on that. But if I'll go to application right now, yes, somebody asked well if I can show where the app ID is. So if you go to your app on the UI, you can see as part of the URL everything after app.application.com/ then you see the ID of your app. Okay, somebody asked another question. I forgot to add a Readme file on the initial repo. Now I created another one, but I cannot push the changes. Can I do it somehow? So if you will just go ahead and add a file to your empty repo. So just let me show you that quickly. I'll go to GitHub and I'll create a new repo. Just give it a name without adding a file. So you can go here and click here, for example, on Readme, and it will add an empty Readme file. And that will allow application to continue with creating the pull request. So if the repository is completely empty, application cannot really create a pull request. So you just need to create a new file. And then you can rebuild your changes, and the changes are going to be pushed to GitHub. Okay, so like I mentioned, we saw that on our CLI command we didn't really specify anything. But if I'll go to application and I'll go right now to entities, I can see that I have my task entity, and I have a title of type single line text, estimation of type single line text, and I want to change that maybe to all number. I have a project, which is a relation to entity project, and a user, which is a relation to entity user. By the way, when talking about relations, you can control on the setting of the relation on cardinality. For example, one task can be related to one user, and one task can be related to one project. And if I will go to the opposite side, to the project right now, we can see that a new, let me maybe refresh that. We can see that the new field called tasks in plural was added to the project, and one project can be related to many tasks. So this is the default, but you can change that if you want. You can change the cardinality in each side of the relation, and then control on that. So we're done creating the fields. Now we can use another CLI command called commit in order to commit our changes, just like clicking here. And of course, there are many advantages of using CLI in order to script some things pre-made, and if you want to regenerate stuff and so on. So it's much easier. I have a really nice script, for example, that creates a whole application with a relation of 5 or 6 different entities and fields and everything for an e-commerce app. Really cool. You know what? Let me quickly see if I can find it, and I'll share that on the chat. Okay, this is the command. Let me just copy that. I'll share the entire thing on the chat if you want to use it later, but that's something that's going to create. The chat doesn't let me really paste it. Okay, I'll send you the file in one of the breaks later, so you can use that if you want. Let me close that. So we run the commit message, the commit command. We see that the commit done. So we'll go back here in application. We can see right now that we'll just maybe refresh that. We can see that we have no pending changes. We can see that we have a new commit that was generated, a new build is running, and a new code was pushed to GitHub. If we'll just click on open GitHub, we can see a new pull request with 54 new changes on our application. So for example, we can see on the client, on the admin, React admin, that we have 4 new views. We can see that we have a new property task on the project DTO or project model, and all the code that was generated. We will look deeper into the code in the next lesson. For now, we will just merge the code, commit it, and we're done. That's it. Really easy. And one last thing I want to show you before I give you some time to do it yourself. You can see that the last commit was done already. And if I click here to open the sandbox environment, so you have the link here, or if it's completed running and you don't have a new task, you can see the link here. But eventually you can see that I have a sandbox environment live on the cloud. I can sign in with default credentials, admin. And you can see that I have an admin UI for our projects and users, and really simple dashboard or admin UI. But more important than that, if I just log out, we can see that I have a REST API and GraphQL API that were generated. So let's open each one of them. I'll open the GraphQL API. You can see that this API, of course, is all documented with the playground in the schema and everything. So we can see that we have mutation for login, create user, update user, delete user, create project, update project, delete project. We have queries for user info, users, user, project, and project in order to get stuff. So let's do a quick test here. I'll go to admin, to the admin UI, and let's create a new project. I'll just give it a description, Prisma Day, and the name also going to be Prisma. The date going to be today, and the user. Okay, there is an empty user with an empty name, but let's just create it and save it. The element was created, and now if I'll go back to the playground, first I need to do authentication. So you can find all the details later on our doc site. But if I'll go here and how to use our APIs, I will just copy the default credentials to authorization. I will paste that here, and let's run a query for project. Query projects, and give me I want to get an ID and the name of the project and created that, and so I can request from GraphQL API any one of the properties, of course, including some relations. So I want to get the user on the project, and I will get their username, and let's run that query. And you can see that I got a project, and the name of the project is Prisma, and the user is admin. So you can easily query, and it's all live. You got a GraphQL API, and like I mentioned, you also have REST API fully documented with Swagger in order to do the exact same stuff. So you have all the actions on the user and auth and project, and everything is here. Can you have many-to-many relations? Yes, of course, you can do that. You can create many-to-many relation. Maybe in the third lesson, in the next lesson, I will show you the generated code and how changes on application impact the generated code, and we'll see how we create many-to-many relation and how Prisma schema, for example, changes with those changes. So I will give you now 5 minutes to complete the task and create the next entity with CLI. I'm all available if you have questions on the Q&A panel, and we'll be continue with the next lesson in 5 minutes from now. Good luck. So guys, anyone who's completed the task, just raise your hand and we'll see if everybody completed before the 5 minutes time, we can continue with the next lesson. I'm going through the chat to see if I missed anything, and there is a question here. Somebody asked, is the code being generated and pushed to GitHub React on the client side? So the answer is yes. We will go through the entire technical stack of the generated application in just in a few minutes on the next lesson. And we'll see the client side, we'll see the server side, the technology in each one of the apps. And if I just may ask, if you want to make sure I will not miss any question, you better use the Q&A. It's more controlled and I can see what was answered and not. So thank you for the question. Okay, please raise your hand once you're done so we will know whether to continue. But we still have a few more minutes, so no rush, take your time, make sure you do it correctly. And please, if you have any question, feel free. I see from time to time some new participant join. So just to make sure it's not too awkward that it's all silent and blank. So we're waiting for the lesson 2 practice to be completed. In 2 or 3 more minutes, we'll continue with the next lesson. Okay. In 1 more minute, we will continue with the next lesson. I see that most of you already raised your hand. A few of you are still working, so I'll give you another minute and then we'll continue. Okay, so moving on to lesson number 3. What we're going to do now, we're going to explore the generated application. The goal of this lesson is to get familiar with the code generated by Amplication and the tech stack used in the generated application. Before we start, what we want to do before we start the actual task, we want to connect from VS Code to our GitHub repository. So let's follow the next step and do that. So let's go to GitHub. And let's go to our repository that we just created. This is the one, Prisma Day. We click on code and we copy the Git URL. Now we'll go to our VS Code, and just to follow the instructions step by step, what we can do is click on Command-Shift-P or F1 and start writing Git CL for the CLI and do Git Clone. So we can use Git Clone from here. By the way, if you want, you can just click on the source control panel and then initialize a repository from Git CLI. So since our folder is already open, this is the option, but usually when you don't have an open folder, it gives you the option to clone. So Git Clone, I'll just paste the URL copied from Git, and I will select a folder and click on open. And this is our server. This is the code, the server and the admin UI. Okay, so once we are connected from VS Code to our repository, we can start following the step in order to see what's going on. So first thing, I want to do some talking about the actual technology on the server and the admin UI. In order to do that, I will quickly go to our doc site on docsamplication.com, and I will open the generated app docs, and I will just go through this document really quick in order to show you the structure of the server and the admin. So basically, first we can see on VS Code that we have two different projects in the repository. We have the server, which is an Nest.js, Node.js application, and we have the admin UI, which is a React client built with React admin. So going through the server, I want to mention a few of the great open source that we are using. All the stack is, all application stack is all well adopted, documented, and tested open source project. We are not using any special or unique proprietary technology in order to generate the app, in order to allow you to easily adopt and change the code and customize it. So we use Nest.js as a framework in order to combine all the server parts together, dependency injection, all the GraphQL, everything. Nest is really, really great framework, and I suggest everybody who doesn't know Nest.js already to go and quickly learn about it. But you can use Amplication actually to learn about it when you generate the code and you get the code. Of course, we use Prisma. We use PostgreSQL for the database. We use Passport for authentication, GraphQL and REST API, Swagger UI for the REST API. We use Jest for testing, and we use Docker in order to containerize everything. On the client side, we use React, and we use React admin. By the way, it's not listed here, but let me quickly open React admin and show you the website. So React admin is really, really cool, really easy to generate admin UI based on GraphQL, and I'll show you the code in a second. So this is our stack. This is our server and client. On the server side, of course, really, really basic and standard design, where you have authentication layer, then you have both GraphQL and REST API, then a layer of services, and then we have Prisma client as the ORM to access the PostgreSDB. In order to go and further explore the application, let's run the application locally and let's see the application in action. So we'll go and follow this instruction in order to run the server, and then we'll do the same for the client. So we're going to go to our application and run npm install as the first step. So we'll go to the server folder and run npm install. This is the first step. Once it will complete, it will continue. We will continue running the Docker DB. The Docker DB, actually, what it will do, this command will execute the command to create a Docker with Postgres in order for us to use it for the development process. So now this is done. We will go and use Docker DB. By the way, each one of those commands, of course, it's a script that exists on the package.json. So if I will go to server and look on package.json, we can see that Docker DB run Docker Compose on Docker Compose DB YAML. And if we're going to look on the Docker Compose DB YAML, we can see that it ran a Postgres image and open it on the port 5 on the port that specified on our script. If I will open Docker dashboard, you can see that this command that we just executed. Let me just move to the desktop in order to show you that. So this is our Docker UI, and we can see that we have the server DB running with Postgres based on the command we executed. So next thing going to be to initialize our database. So first thing to run is to run Prisma generate. Prisma generate will take the Prisma schema file, which I'll show you in a second, but it's right there. And it generates the Prisma client in order for us to be able to use Prisma. Next thing going to be run db init, which will seed our database with some base user, the admin, the default user, and credential in order to be able to start using it. And now we are ready to go and run our server and start using it. So the DB is running, it was initialized, everything is ready, and we can just run npm run start. And the server is running, it's running on port 3000. So if I'll go here and go to localhost 3000/GraphQL. We can see our, ignore the existing file. So this is just from previous session. Let's close it so it will not confuse you. So we can see on here, we can see we have our user and project and task entities, all the queries and all the queries and mutation. And same thing, if I'll go to /API, we can see the Swagger documentation for our REST API. And this is for the server. If I'll go back to the instruction, we can see that we need to do the same thing for running the admin UI. So we just need to do npm install and npm run start. So I will open a new terminal. cd admin UI npm install. Guys, if you have any questions, I'm always available on the Q&A panel, and I would love to answer those either online or by text on the Q&A panel. So feel free, if you're missing anything, if you want me to go slower or faster on anything, just say. So once npm install on admin will be done, we will be able to run npm run start. All right, that's it. We will be able to run npm one start, and the admin UI will open on port 3001, and it will work against our database and server on port 3000. So just a few more seconds in order for it to complete and open. Okay, this is it. We can see we have our admin UI with the task, project, user. We can go and create entities. We can edit them. We can do whatever we want. Of course, we can use directly the API like I showed you before on the sandbox. So everything is running. You can see that actually, if you have a schema that or database schema that you want to create, you just need to go to application, use the UI or CLI in order to add the schema, generate the code, and you have a full-blown app with authentication, authorization, logging, GraphQL API, REST API, everything is generated for you. Now, what we're going to do in the next step, we're going to look on the generated code. We're going to see some code. Finally, in order to be able to understand what we have in ends, in order to be able to go and customize it and change it and add custom logic on top of it. So first thing we want to see the Prisma schema. Prisma schema, if anyone of you didn't use Prisma yet, and if you're here, I believe you did, but if you didn't, so this is the actual schema of the database that Prisma uses in order to generate the client, in order to run migrations. So let's go and see that file first. So we'll go to Prisma. We can see we have the schema Prisma here, and it's going to look very familiar to you. So if you remember the models we created in application, we had the user with all those fields, including relation. We had a project, we had a task. So you can see that the project has a relation to a task with an array of the task model, and the task have a relation to project with a project ID. So it's a one-to-many. And of course, everything we did on application UI, we see here in the Prisma file. The second thing I want to explore before we go and start adding new entities and see how it affects the code, I want to look on the entity folder. So each entity has a dedicated folder under the source folder in the server. And each one of those folders has a unique structure. Not common, it's really common, but its own structure. So for example, if we want to look on the project, we have project controller, we have project module, resolver, and service, all of them on directly under the project folder. And then we have the base folder with many other files like the create input for the GraphQL and find many args, and the project where input and the actual project model. And we also have the controller base with all the code that runs. So for example, find many projects on the controller, and same thing for the resolver, all the code for the resolver. Of course, if I didn't mention before, everything is fully typed with TypeScript. So everything is here. We have the service that wrap Prisma for all the action like find one, and of course, for relations. So if I'm in a project, I want to find tasks, so it goes and do that, get user, and so on. So this is a structure of each one of the entities. So we have project, we have task, we have user. In addition, there are a few other generic folder or more system level folder like auth and util and Swagger documentation, which you can go and explore further. Now, what I want to do, I want to use the cool compare feature on GitHub in order to see how changes in application impact our app. So let's go to application and add a new entity field and then see what's going on. So we'll go to the project and we'll add a new field, due date, and then we're going to commit the changes in order to trigger a new build and push changes to GitHub. And then we will open the pull request on GitHub and see the changes. So let's go and do that. we'll go to our project model and we'll add a new field called due date. Once again, application make it daytime field automatically. And now we'll commit it, add due date. We'll commit those changes. Once again, this commit going to take a few seconds to complete and the code to be pushed to GitHub. That's it. The code is ready in GitHub and I'll go and open it. And we see 21 file change on our application. And let's see the changes. Let's understand what happened on application. That's going to help us a lot to understand the structure of application. So of course, we can see the new due date field on the project model. And it's since it's not a required field, it's a date or now. And we can see all the DTOs for the GraphQL API and the REST API, all the input and args also as this new field due date on the create input and order by input and update input and so on. We can see changes on the React admin for the new field. So on the project create, for example, we have a new daytime input for the due date. On the project edit, we have the same thing and so on. And the project list, we have a new column for the due date. We have a change on, this is some internal configuration file handled by application in order to identify the version that the code was generated and so on. So you can ignore that. It's not really critical for this change, nothing to see here. Of course, we can see the schema Prisma file that were changed and our new field is right now added on the project model. We see that property on the project model itself with all the required decorators for the GraphQL API, REST API, and so on. And this is more or less all the changes that we see. And of course, if you had to do that by hand and go and change 21 files, it's going to take you much more time. So let's go and commit this change. And now let's go and do the next change and let's see what will change. So add a new entity on and compare the changes. So right now we're going to go and create a new total new entity called location, and the location going to have a name field and the relation between the task and the location. So we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to create that entity and we're going to go to GitHub in order to see the changes. So you know what, before continue, instead of giving you time to do everything at once, maybe you can just move on and complete step number 3, everything until step number 3, in order to be able to better understand step number 4 later, once we will do it together. So I will give you some time right now. You can go and start connecting from VS Code to your application and complete steps 1, 2, 3. I'm going to give you, I think, 7 to 10 minutes to complete that. It's going to be maybe longer than previous steps. But once again, once you complete, feel free to raise your hand. And if everybody completed, we will be able to continue. So guys, while you are walking, I just want to show you an article I wrote on Dev2 with the script, the CLI script I mentioned before. So you can go there. I'll paste that on the chat. You can go and look on that script, the CLI script. It's really cool because you're running that, you get an entire kind of an e-commerce application with customer address, product, images, all their line item, and all in like less than a minute. You get all the code for that. And of course, you can change that CLI easily and execute that as a batch with your own data model. And you can go and use that. So if you want it, you can find it on this link I paste on the chat. We have 5 more minutes in order for you to complete the task. Once again, like before, please raise your hand once you complete. I see a few of you already completed. You still have a few more minutes to run, no worries. If anybody of you already completed, I just want to share a few more general stuff. So first, a link to our Discord channel is on the bottom of the main page on the Notion. So you can always find me and the rest of the team, and a lot of the community members already there active. So if you have a question, if you want to ask for missing feature, if you have any back to reports, please join Application Discord and you can find us there. And of course, this document, the entire document is public, and we will keep it alive, so you can always come back and follow the steps and do everything on your own time. And of course, you can also share that with your friends, and we would love that. And one last thing, of course, please go to Application Repo on GitHub and add a star if you like the project. Don't forget to do it. So right now we have 3,066 stars. Let's see how many we'll have by the end of this session. Please go ahead and do that. Thanks. Okay, 1 last minute for everybody to complete, and we will move on with the next step. So let's move on. Next step will be to create an entire entity and compare the changes. So let's go back to our app on application, and let's add a new entity. We call it location. We're going to give the location one field called name, and we'll go to our task entity, and we add a location field here for relation to the location entity. And let's commit that, add location entity, and we'll commit that changes. Once again, we can see the generation process going on here on the logs. That's it. It's ready. We can open the Github, and let's see what happened now. So as you can expect, of course, we're going to have a whole new folder, entity folder with new files, and of course, additional changes to some of the more base files. So we can see that on the app, we have now the location list, location create, and so on the client side. Of course, all the new entities on the location, on the new DTOs on the location entity, location create args, and input and find many and all that. Let's quickly find Prisma Schema. So we can see all those changes on Prisma Schema. Some of them are just spacing, so ignore those, just formatting differentiation. But we can see that we have a new field location on the task with location ID. And we have a new model called location with reference to task and the name, and all that was generated for us automatically. Let's commit those changes. And let's pull the recent changes and update the version and see how we do it with Prisma migration and all the rest of the stuff. So we'll go to our app. Let's open a new terminal window. We'll use git pull to get the recent changes from GitHub, and we see right now we have the location folder, for example. And if we look on Prisma, we can see that we have all the new stuff. So for example, on the project, we have the due date and we have the new location model, everything is here. So we got all the recent changes. Now, in order to use those changes, we need to run Prisma Migrate in order to apply the changes on the database. So in order to do that, we use that command npx Prisma Migrate dev and the name of the migration. No, let's go into the server folder and do that again. So what they always saw, by the way, in case you will notice that, npm says it doesn't know Prisma in order to execute that command. That was because we were on the root folder and Prisma is installed on the node module on the server folder. So we just changed the location. That's it. We have new migration. By the way, if you look on the source control panel, you can see that we have a new migration that created the column due date on the project and created the task and the location and everything. That's all handled by Prisma. Let's go back to the instruction. The next thing to execute is to run Prisma generate in order to regenerate the Prisma client, although it is part of the migration, just to make sure we get it. But like I said, it's part of the migration, so it was generated. And now we can just go and run npm start again, and we should see that our server is still running here. So we close that, we close the server, And we can also use, instead of just using npm run, we can use the pre-built start watch in order to run the server with the watch attribute, the watch parameter, in order to identify changes on the folder and restart the server with every change. So that's running, and we should see our client also running still. So if we'll go here and open our client again, we can see the location. So it's all here. We can go and create location, task, and same thing with the APIs. Everything is here. So you see how simple is that. So you just go to application, add a new entity, running Git pull, and a couple of Prisma to generate and to run the migration, and we are ready. All is ready for us. Okay, guys, we are ready for the last lesson. Last lesson, we will do some actual code customizations. So maybe use the next few minutes just to complete the last pull request from the server in order to be ready for the next task. And we'll move on to that. I will not let you wait too much time. I know it's sometimes a little bit boring for anyone who completed the task together with me. So we'll continue in a minute or two. Just try to complete the next task. If no, you can maybe complete that after the session. It's not critical for the fourth session. We can continue with the fourth session without you completing the last task. So take a minute to complete whatever you want, and we'll see how we can customize the generated code. Okay, so we'll move on with the last lesson. In this lesson, we will actually see how we can actually customize the app with real code that you want to add to your app on top of what application is generating. So let's quickly try to understand how it works. So like we mentioned before, there is the entity folder for each one of the entities. And we saw before that each one of them has two folders, a base file folder and a customizable, and the actual customizable files that are on the root of the folder. So the base files are the ones that are automatically generated by application with every change. These files should not be altered or customized, as they will be overwritten and the changes will not be preserved. Remember that if you want to add custom code, do not do that on the base folder. So if we're gonna go here and look on the user folder, for example, we can see that we have a user resolver base with all the code for the resolver. So for example, give me the list of user, find many, and give me a single user, and so on. But we also have a user resolver file here, which is inheriting and extending the user resolver base. And here we can do whatever we want in order to override the core functionality, in order to write the default functionality. And this is what we will do in this lesson. We will see how to do it. So remember, the base file is always regenerated by application. So if you will create changes in application and you will create a new pull request, any changes that you made manually in those changes will be overwritten. But these files are safe to be changed. So this file will never be overwritten by application. It's only created once on your first pull request, or if it's missing, it will be recreated. But it will never override any changes on those files. So you are free to do whatever you want here. So let's see how we do it. We will do three changes. The first one going to be adding a new function to a user service. The second one going to be adding a new endpoint to the user controller in order to execute the new function. And the last one going to be on GraphQL query. We're going to add a new query on GraphQL in order to do some modification. So let's start with the first one. In that case, we will go to the user service. It's located in server source user service TS. And this is the initial file. Let's go there and have a look at it. So this is our user service. You can see this is a class that extends the user service base. This class currently has no function beside the constructor. If we'll go to the user base service, you can see it includes some function like count, find many, find one, create, update, delete, and also find task and find project for the relations. And what we will do here, we will add a function to reset password. So in order to do that, first we're going to add this import to the user from the base folder. So it's already here, no need. We're going to add this import, user find unique args. So let me just maybe remove that step. It's not really required because it's already in the base file, the generated one. So we added the use find unique args. Now we're going to just add this function to the end of the class. Okay, Prisma is missing. So let's go to user service base and we'll just be able to copy the same import from here. And I will add that to the instruction. So we don't need that. We just need Prisma. Wait, that's not it. No, sorry, my mistake. Okay, we need to inject Prisma. In order to do that, sorry, something is missing and is a little bit confused in this instruction, but let's go and do that. So what we need to inject Prisma to the service. So we'll go to user service base and we'll copy and mimic that behavior. We just need to add this to the constructor. Of the service. And now we need to add Prisma service also. Okay, and that's it. Sorry for that. I will update the file, by the way, just after this session ends. I will update the file with the correct things. Something it's not up to date. So these instructions were correct on the previous version, but some code was changes on the generation. So we need to add those. So I will update the instruction after this stage. But this is it. We are ready. Our user service right now has a reset password function, which gets as an args the user find unique args parameter, and it goes to Prisma and update where based on the instruction, and it changed the password to whatever we want to. And of course, this is just an example. Do not use that on production. Use the best practices based on any other package that generate any random code, or use an external service for authentication. So this is the first thing I want to show you, how to reset password. Second, I want to show you how to go and add a new endpoint on the REST API. So we will go to the user controller, and we will add this code in order to create the new endpoint. So once again, we should go here on the user controller TS. This is the file right now. It's an empty file that extends the user controller base. Now we'll add the following imports to the file. Okay, and we'll add that function to the end of the file, the end of the class. So by the way, one more note, if you go to docs.amplication.com, you have an explanation on customization the application. The exact same 3 examples out there, and there is a step-by-step explanation of the changes. So we explain each of the decorators, what's the role of the decorator and why it's there. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask now, but if you want to learn more, you can go and read Nest or just use the documentation in order to see that. So let's go and use our service. And that's okay, guys, now I understand all my mistakes. I changed the user resolver instead of changing the user service. That's why everything was missing there. So let's undo that. My bad. Okay, let's undo that. And let's go back to the instruction of the previous step. And let's do it again. So probably we need that again. We need to add the user service. Okay, right there. And let's copy that. That was also required on the user service. And let's copy the function. And everything is cool right now. So, okay, that makes more sense. Sorry for that confusion. And if I'll go back now to the controller, we see that it also recognizes the reset password. So we have right now a new controller that do the reset password. It calls this function. And since we are using the server with the watcher, so you can see that the server, every time we do a change on the files, the server is restarting. So if we will go to localhost 3000 API, so you can see on the user, so we have here password. So you see that was updated. Okay. One last thing I want to show you is to update the resolver. So let's go back to our instructions. And what we're going to do now, we add a new query to the resolver in order to overwrite an existing query. So once again, we'll take that and copy that and go to the resolver. We'll add that reference. We'll take that and add it here. And in this case, you will see that we actually overriding an existing function. And there is already a function called user on the base, but since we're extending and creating in the same function with the same name, it's going to override an existing query. But this time we just change the behavior of the query. In this case, we just change and take 100 records instead of just unlimited query. Of course, there is a built-in support for pagination if you want to use it from the client side, but this is just an example to show you how to do it. And if we'll save that, Okay, we will not really see any change on the client because that's the same query that we had before. We just changed the behavior of the query, but the query is still here. So of course we can still see here that we have the query for the users. Okay, guys, so I'm still here. You can take the next few minutes to go through this last lesson and complete the task. If you have any questions, I'll be here on the Q&A for the next 10 minutes. Other than that, I'm completed the task. That's a wrap. So feel free to contact me in any of the ways I mentioned before. I'm always available on Discord channel if you want to ask questions, if you need any help. And of course, I'm here on the Q&A for the next few minutes if you want to have any help with this last step. Other than that, thank you very much for the time. I enjoyed being here, and it was a pleasure. And thank you for Prisma for hosting me.